Good morning, everyone. All right, ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand for the national anthem of Panama? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please have your seat. What a beautiful anthem. Good morning. My name is Cleveland Sam from the Nature Conservancy, and I'll be taking you through the program this morning. Steve McAndrew, IFRC Deputy Regional Director, Dr. Jyoth Singh, Director of Policy and Strategic Programs at TNC Caribbean, Daniel Morchain, Director of Global Adaptation, TNC Global, Dr. Steve Shows, the TNC Science Lead, representatives from our Red Cross colleagues, representatives of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, as well as some presidents of the Red Cross societies nationally. We want to welcome you to this morning's event. And should I be courteous and say buenos dias, señoras, señores, y señores, and good morning. And I was spared trying to say that in German, since I need to apologize for the absence of our German ambassador. He was actually on his, trying to get here, but he's delayed at the airport. And we know how travel goes for those of us who traveled yesterday and the day before. There was quite a bit of delays. So we will proceed. The Oxford Dictionary describes resilient as such, and I quote, a person or animal able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions, Is substance or object able to recoil or spring back into shape after bending, stretching, or being compressed? End of quote. In addition, the American Psychological Association describes it as a process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. End of quote. I'm sure that most of us here, well, all of us here, especially those of us who are involved in this project, can identify with those two definitions. But if I may, I want to punctuate a few of those words: adapting, flexibility, and of course, a process. I was not at TNC when this project, Resilient Islands, started a few years ago. However, over the last 18 months, I have seen and heard about the absolutely life-changing impact of this collaborative project. I am confident that the impact of RI, as we call it for short, will be felt in our target communities for generations to come, and want to congratulate all of our staff, the staff of the Red Cross, for this project and for bringing it to such an efficient landing. In addition, yes, I think that's a good way, that's a good part to clap. Thank you very much. Perhaps it is no coincidence that this program's closing ceremony is being held in Panama. And I know some persons were asking, why Panama? The project is not in Panama, but I can offer a simple explanation, or maybe not such a simple explanation. Panama, I am told, or my research suggests, is the land of connections. East meets west. Atlantic meets the Pacific Ocean. It is where people from throughout the Caribbean and the Americas came to build one of the world's engineering marvels, the Panama Canal. On the conservation front, it is said that Panama's biodiversity is 3 times, and I repeat that, 3 times higher than the United States, Canada, and Europe combined. So there we are. The International Society of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, the Society of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Society has been a trusted partner in the Resilient Islands project over the years. I want to invite Martha Keys. She is not here for very good reasons. She wanted to be here with us, and she is the IFRC's Regional Director for the Americas, and she's going to bring some opening remarks via video. So please pay attention to the video.
Dear members of the diplomatic community, representatives of the Nature Conservancy, presidents of Red Cross societies, and IFRC colleagues. As Regional Director of the IFRC for the Americas region, it is an honor to be here with you, even if virtually, to summarize the impact of this exemplary program and celebrate the power of nature, resilience, and community engagement. In 2017, the Nature Conservancy and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies joined forces and created Resilient Islands, a program to tackle the impacts of the climate crisis in the Caribbean, rethink community resilience, and harness the power of nature to protect people. The challenge before us was monumental. We aimed to protect the most vulnerable coastal communities in the Dominican Republic, Grenada, and Jamaica by promoting the use of coastal habitats to reduce climate-related risk and combining cutting-edge conservation science with world-leading expertise in disaster preparedness and response. At a time when weather-related hazards and rising ocean temperatures are becoming more extreme and destructive, and families in those countries are still recovering from the socioeconomic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Resilient Islands program has demonstrated that mangroves, coral reefs, and reforestation can save lives and livelihoods. It has also shown that by working with humanitarian and scientific organizations like us, governments can design climate-resilient laws and climate-smart development plans that promote more and better early warning systems and anticipate climate-related disasters. Laws and policies are one of the pillars for effectively addressing the climate crisis. They can create an enabling environment for scaling up investments in nature-based solutions that protect, manage, and restore ecosystems that can limit people's exposure and vulnerability to hazards. The other, without a doubt, is to put the voices of communities at the center of our work. Local actors have played a critical role in ensuring that Resilient Islands approaches are responsive to local needs, inclusive, and sustainable. The involvement, support, and understanding of local communities is essential to restore and protect ecosystems and make solutions sustainable. Equally important is the role of Red Cross societies and their network of branches and volunteers who are organic members of the communities we work with. In summary, 5 years on, this pioneering program has not only changed people's lives, as community members themselves will explain to us later this morning, it has also left us with at least 3 significant lessons. Lesson number 1, working with nature to protect people pays off. And as the climate crisis worsens, we should strengthen and expand this approach across the Caribbean and the Americas. Lesson number 2, there is no resilience without localization. Communities are at the forefront of the climate crisis, but also of the design of the implementation of climate-smart solutions that protect them and their livelihoods. And finally, lesson number 3, change is more likely when complementary organizations work together. The alliance between the Nature Conservancy and the IFRC is a model of the innovation, generosity, and vision the world needs to address the climate crisis, arguably the greatest challenge of our time. Hence, I agree with Mr. Brumbaugh, this project should mark the start of a very long-term collaboration between our 2 organizations. Finally, I would like to recognize the invaluable support of the German government's International Climate Initiative. Thousands of people are safer and more resilient today, thanks to their visionary contribution. We are grateful for this effective and transformative partnership. I wish you all a fruitful event and look forward to outlining the next steps in this collaborative journey. Thank you very much. Dear members of the diplomatic community,
I think you can do a little better than that. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Keys. Next, Dr. Rob Brumbaugh is the Executive Director of TNC Caribbean Division. Rob, again, really wanted to be here, but he is not able to be here. However, like Martha, he also used the technology, and here is Rob via video.
Hello, I'm Rob Brumbaugh, the Executive Director of the Nature Conservancy. Hello, I'm Rob Brumbaugh, the Executive Director of the Nature Conservancy's Caribbean Division. It is a privilege to offer a few welcoming remarks and to congratulate the project team as this meeting commences. The Resilient Islands Initiative was designed to transition from a focus on disaster response to disaster prevention and climate resilience in a region where climate-related disasters are so prevalent. Importantly, the Resilient Islands Initiative brought nature into the picture. Healthy and well-managed habitats, like mangroves and coral reefs, serve as a buffer against climate impacts, like storm surges, and they are vital for supporting local communities by producing fish, supporting tourism, and providing other direct benefits to the economy. The project itself is a model approach for bringing together organizations with very different and yet very complementary capabilities. The Nature Conservancy's expertise in cutting-edge conservation science, data, and planning tools, and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies the world's largest leader in disaster planning and prevention and response. The project underscored the value of collaboration and partnership, especially considering the challenges presented by a global COVID-19 pandemic in the middle of the project. The team was forced repeatedly to pivot and adapt, and the strength of the collaboration allowed them to do so in ways that perhaps yielded even better outcomes and new insights that we would not have imagined at the beginning. Given this shared experience, I am certain that this project marks the start of a very long-term and productive collaboration between our two organizations. The project focused on helping communities prioritize and invest in protection of nature and natural habitats so that those habitats could serve as nature-based solutions to tackle climate challenges like flooding and storm-related challenges. A core element of Resilient Islands was involving those communities directly in the planning, design, and implementation of local activities. The project provided an opportunity to test solutions and develop tools that address the unique challenges faced by each of those communities involved in the project. Ultimately, those communities were at the forefront of using climate-smart approaches for building climate resilience while simultaneously improving livelihoods. For example, the project team worked directly with ranchers and farmers in the Dominican Republic to improve agricultural practices in mountainous regions and do so in ways that supported their livelihoods while also reducing the risk downstream from flooding during storms. In Grenville Bay, Grenada, and in Old Harbor, Jamaica, the team worked directly with fishers to protect and restore mangroves and offshore coral reefs that provide the first line of defense from coastal storms. Those same ecosystems produce the fish that they depend on for their local fisheries economy. This tailored approach reinforced the value and the opportunity of using nature as a core strategy for addressing climate-related challenges while simultaneously producing economic development benefits. Finally, in closing, I want to express our gratitude and for the support of the German government's International Climate Initiative. This initiative has a long history in the Caribbean of supporting economic development programs and has a keen understanding of the importance of addressing climate challenges simultaneously in a region so challenged by climate impacts. We are grateful for that kind of partnership. Once again, I wish the project team great success in closing this incredible initiative and to shaping the next steps on our journey together. Thank you.
Put your hands together for, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you for the generous applause. At this time, we are going to have the round table where we're going to hear from some of the project. Sorry, let's just get the video up and running. Members of the roundtable, we are going to show you some of the results of the Resilient Island project. Again, this is a video that was put together by the communications team from both the Red Cross and TNC. Enjoy.
Every hurricane that comes, there comes a destruction of the reefs.
Climate vulnerability in the Caribbean is a serious challenge, but one that nature can help to address.
The Resilient Islands program uses climate-smart approaches, including nature-based solutions to reduce disaster risk while increasing coastal resilience to protect communities in Jamaica, Grenada, and the Dominican Republic.
TNC, IFRC and its national societies have joined forces in a collaborative alliance to work on a significant project aimed at creating positive impact in the community. We work together with communities and governments to facilitate conversations, share scientific research findings, and provide recommendations that can shape policies and create an enabling environment for sustainable initiatives.
Working within the mangrove ecosystem is a critical part of any risk reduction efforts. It's so interesting that we've had mangroves planted by school kids. And 2 years after, the children are coming back to the same site and like, oh my goodness, I planted this mangrove. It is even taller than I am.
Cuando no hay árboles, ese filtro natural se rompe. Y por eso es que ocurren inundaciones bruscas. Inmediatamente nosotros reforestemos el área. Eso va a cambiar.
En la cuenca se están estableciendo dos sistemas de producción. Uno agroforestal, que es el que tenemos con la siembra de cacao y naranja, el cual produce beneficios para los propietarios. Y otro sistema silvopastoril, que es la combinación de árboles frutales con forraje, que va en beneficio para la alimentación del ganado.
I'd love for them to become a model community, a community that is self-sufficient. Kids could grow up and learn and respect their environment.
We want a complete approach where government and civil society and everyone recognizes the value of that nature has.
It's like a scalable model that could be replicated across all Caribbean countries.
We know these solutions are working, number one, because they were developed for the community, by the community.
As we go along, getting more educated into the ecosystem, it will also help us to adapt and to change and to rearrange our life and our livelihood for the future to come.
By empowering and engaging communities and governments with planning tools, policies, and a portfolio of solutions, TNC and IFRC are contributing to reducing vulnerability and enhancing climate resilience to protect and preserve the Caribbean islands.
Okay, put your hands together for that, but I want to especially acknowledge Claudia. You can stand. Claudia was behind the production, please, of the series of RI videos. Lots of really hard work in bringing them to this stage. And I can tell you that the reaction to the videos, well, at least initially at TNC when they landed on YouTube and social media, was really, really, really good. So thanks again, Claudia, and to your colleagues from the Red Cross who you work with throughout the region to ensure that we captured the project for time to come, for history. I mean, I say to Claudia and my colleagues all the time, we are creating history, and this is one way that we are documenting that history. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into a very interactive session. We are calling it a roundtable, reflections on the RI project implementation from both the Red Cross and TNC. So as I call the name of the panelists, I would like them to come and take a seat here. Samantha Dixon from Grenada. Put your hands together for Samantha and welcome her. Please. Kevin Douglas from Jamaica, and you saw Kevin in the video as well. And also from Jamaica, Donna Blake from TNC Program Director in Jamaica. All right, and we have Steve Schill from TNC, the lead scientist. And last but by no means least, Eddie, who is the project manager for Resilient Island here for TNC. All right, so guys, welcome to the stage. Supposed to say thank you. All right, so we're gonna ask a few questions and have a discussion with our colleagues. And I'm gonna kick it off by just basically directing the questions, and you can decide who among you are going to respond. So as we know, generally, some of the realities that it relates to projects include the fact that projects generally are time-bound and we are constrained by parameters such as restrictive funding, limited capacities, and of course, how the project is going to be sustained. So can you tell us what went well and what didn't go so well with the Resilient Island project? I'm not sure who wants to kick it off. All right, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Morning again, everyone. I'm going to reference the policy and advocacy focus and say that Our objective in that regard was to identify opportunities to improve legislation and policy so that they emphasize nature as an important tool towards achieving coastal resilience. And in the design of the project, along with IFRC, we recognized that there were going to be some challenges with Government of Jamaica capacity, for example. And so we tried to, I'm going to say, design that, a solution into that, recognizing that challenge. And so, for example, we had a roadmap devised, which would look at the recommendations made for legislation and policy, and talk about exactly which institution and both community and national level would have a role. And recognizing that that in itself would not be enough, we sought to do two other things, which is to build capacity for advocacy among Government of Jamaica and community, as well as develop an advocacy strategy. And finally, we developed a nature-based solutions portfolio, which allowed us to really galvanize ideas from the community and from the government about what would make sense to make this really useful. So those are really, I think, successful components with regard to policy.
All right, Kevin, I know you wanted to say something earlier.
Sure. Yes, so there are many things that went well. I'll just highlight two. So for me, one is that the Resilient Islands project really shattered the sometimes held notion that a project that focuses on climate change adaptation and management of the natural resources, there's sometimes a notion held that it cannot be community-led and scientifically sound at the same time. And for me, RI shattered that and showed that even these kind of initiatives can be community-led and still scientifically, empirically sound at the same time. And for me, that was that's something that is major. And one other thing I share is that I think Resilient Islands project also helped to highlight to the government of Jamaica the importance of nature in risk reduction. And I think when the story is told, and it has started already, that the RI project. So for example, when we just started, we needed one of the first tasks was to identify an area in which the project should be directed. And so of course we needed an objective means of selection. Because of course, in Jamaica, like many other countries, you run the risk of being labeled as being, not objective, or why the project went this way or that way. And so our partnership with the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, through their existing tool, they had a vulnerability ranking index tool, was pretty limited. It existed, but the parameters, for example, were quite narrow, and they were all core disaster risk management. And so we saw the VRI elevated to the MVI, which is a modified vulnerability ranking index, and now it is actually a national tool. It's a national vulnerability ranking index, and the significance of that is that the in Jamaica and many other countries, the natural resources management and disaster risk management tend to be distant cousins in terms of the interactions or so on are not on the practical level. But what we have from that tool is that ODPEM is now, for example, collecting ecosystems data. So in ranking a community in terms of its vulnerability and hence what needs to be done to build the resilience and reduce the hazard impacts, we see that ecosystems are now an important part of that. And so this is a national tool that has been linked into the National Risk Information Platform, which basically captures national data for Jamaica for reporting under all its conventions and so on. And so the fact that that has been there, and if you go on the NVRI website, you will see the credits to the Resilient Islands Project, TNC, and the Jamaica Red Cross IFRC. So I think those are significant milestones which have started the process. In terms of what didn't go so well, certainly we would love to have gone further into the suite of nature-based solutions in terms of implementation. But again, it's one of the other, during the project lifetime, we'd love to do that. But I guess it underscores the point again that projects of this nature needs time because of some of the inhibitions and so on. But the fact that it is there still holds that foundation firm. that we can continue to implement, which we have started to build upon.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Yes, I'm going to go to Samantha for a Grenada
Thank you
perspective.
for the opportunity. Good morning, and acknowledging the viewing audience as well. I want you to take a journey backward just a little bit. And then because of the idea, it was a seed that was planted. It was planted in Grenada. It was at the water's edge. It was a bilateral arrangement between TNC and Grenada Red Cross. And then out of the successes of that relationship came the birth of a bigger airline that you said landed.
Yes.
And I hope it's for refueling.
There you go.
Yes. So I'm going to add to another perspective in terms of the community presence that was probably there, but was strengthened because of the interventions of a program like the RI project. For us in Grenada, it's also leaving resources like the Fisher facility that is going to produce a safer haven and give the Red Cross the opportunity to remain in community to strengthen its brand and visibility on ground. In terms of newness of the actual content of what we were trying to do, people perceive the Red Cross with a certain notion as having to do the health component or just the response when something happened and the people that kind of just go in the emergency. But now we have the opportunity to prevent a new type of emergency. And so maybe the response will be different. And it also builds the capacity of national societies to put things in place. Mainstreaming nature-based solutions in all the programs that we do in the first aid and all the other areas that we work in is also an opportunity. Working with academia to continue collecting data and strengthening what we do. How do we bridge the gap between what we are implementing and behavior change? How do we measure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So we are in the communities, and hopefully the Resilient Island project gives us another opportunity to engage with our communities and to stay there longer, and hopefully to change minds and change behaviors.
Great. I just want to pick up, Steve. Yes, I'm coming to you actually to pick up on something Kevin said, which was a very important point, that the project was community-led and at the same time scientifically sound. You are a scientist by all stretch of the imagination, cool scientist. Steve is actually a very cool scientist. He's not the guys you see in the movies who's like nerdy. He's a cool scientist, right? So, Steve, I mean, the science of this project, tell us about some of that.
Yeah, well, I want to just briefly say that I think this project, we talk about working with our partners to achieve conservation. And I think this is like a perfect marriage. And from the beginning, the people side of things with IFRC and then with TNC, and we're a science-based organization, and bringing nature and the marriage of people and using science to identify, well, where are the important areas of nature? And we use technology to map that out. And then we can also use technology to map out people. Where do people live and where are people vulnerable? So at the nexus of nature and vulnerable people, we find a place where this project focused on. And conservation needs to happen at multiple scales. And I think at the community level is where we can have some of the biggest impacts, because it's there where we really raise awareness and we can really change behavior and attitudes. And the tools that were used, with community engagement and understanding the perceptions, understanding the knowledge that they had, and then bringing in the science, drone mapping. We were mapping at centimeter level. We were bringing in models. We were going from the reefs to the ridges and understanding how everything is connected. And it provided an opportunity to really look at a scale that needs to be explored more, because there's things that we discovered, tools that we developed, and then understanding the decision-making process of that's always been a challenge. Is we can develop good science products, but how do we move that into the decision-making process to actually affect change and advocate for that? So I think this was a great baseline that we accomplished here, and there's so much more we can do to grow this and to replicate it across other communities that are vulnerable.
Great. Eddie, yeah. Eddie, as a project manager of Resilient Island, what would you say was really so novel about this partnership that led to its success? What are some of the things that were novel about it?
Well, when you think about two different organizations, different perspectives, different ideas of what a crisis means in climate, and when you put them together, you think this is not going to work. And when I started this project, that was my biggest fear. It was a nightmare for me. Then, as we started to have the conversations, we realized that we have common issues. And as humans, right, we have suffered these issues. We have suffered this crisis. And we needed to be open to do something else, to think outside the box. And the thinking outside the box was, for instance, in the case of the Nature Conservancy, who is being strictly with science and conservation of coral reefs and mangroves, was to put people at the center of that, right? We are now reducing risks of people, right? Ecosystems are important, but people is at the center of that. The other is the willingness of our colleagues from the Red Cross to somehow adopt the management systems in TNC. And we've been changing this a lot. We had a training on effective, highly effective teams, which really helped us shape, what the project was going to be in the next 5-6 years. After that, I was able to sleep 6 hours, 7 hours. Yes. The other is, when you look at Resilient Islands, is not just the science and community engagement, but there are many other elements that may seem invisible, but are there and are part of the whole. This is systems thinking, and we are talking about our policy work. We are talking about resource mobilization. We are talking about making the case, right? It's not only creating the plans, talking to the communities, but actually being on the ground and start, making these projects something tangible that the communities are going to feel. And that's what we've done. Something that I guess, if we would repeat Resilient Islands, I would like to change is, and in our conversations, we developed a vision for the team, right? We wanted to use the power of nature, the power of science, the power of community engagement, of humanitarian aid to support communities. But the missing part was that this is a project. And the project in 4, 5, 6 years had to end. We needed to start thinking about a program, something more programmatic, something in the long term, which is going to really reflect a high impact in the communities, a high impact in the conservation of our resources. And that's still a work that is ongoing. I want to close today Resilient Islands, the first phase, I want to call it. Maybe we are not living Resilient Islands anymore because we're thinking to extend this initiative beyond islands to other regions of the world where vulnerable people also require our need. They have the need, the urgency of, become resilient through our help. So the other is probably something that made me think the flexibility of the Germans, as we think about sustainability. In the middle of the project, we decided to work on a resource mobilization strategy, a joint strategy that made us sit down and think about the future. And what we see right now is just the middle point. We want to go to, I don't want to call it the end, but to look into another, a path, which is going to lead us to expand our collaboration. With this resource mobilization strategy, we were able to fundraise to get resources outside of what was planned for IKI and what was planned as co-financing. And with the help of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, for instance, with the help of other stakeholders, GIZ and local organizations, the money does not necessarily has gone through TNC, the IFRC, but through other partners, and we are advancing with this initiative. I do hope in the future we'll continue working with resource mobilization, and the missing piece is sustainable financing. Insurance, for instance, would be really helpful. Other innovative finance mechanisms that are going to provide this financial sustainability that is needed to implement nature-based solutions and make the case, for private investment to attract other sectors. And the other is we've been just targeting flooding, right? Flood risks. But I really would like to go into other sectors, for instance, with agriculture, the need of water, right? Water security, and more emphasis in food security.
Thank you so much. Put your hands together for Eddie. And one of the elements coming through all of these statements is really the passion. You can feel the passion of our colleagues here. Moving on, and maybe Eddie, you probably mentioned it in your contribution, but I'm going to ask this question, so each of you, in terms of what do you see as the one critical ingredient that is needed for climate adaptation and increased resilience to be actually actualized, not just in the Caribbean, as we were saying, but now across the globe? What is that critical element? Go ahead, Samantha.
As I reflect on the question that you ask, I think now we have to translate all of this wonderful work into policy, and at the states level, we have to prioritize. And I think we need to make it practical, make it make it look dollars and cents. And so if we convince prevention is going to cost you less than if you have to respond to what has happened, I think we can sell what we're trying to do better. I do understand the challenges with the resource mobilization and the competition for resources to do other things as we prioritize. But I think changing actions into, as you say, programs, so that for long-term sustainability, getting the national authorities to support national societies and agencies that do this type of work, because it's one thing to engage the community and then to sustain it without, let's say, the national collaboration would be a lot of effort gone to waste. So I think being innovative in the resource mobilization, as well as the laws and policies and programs that would support ongoing programs.
Yes, my view is very, very similar to what Sam just expressed, and Eddie into that as well, in that it be looked at from a program level, because, of course, of the level of intricacies, for example, that is involved at the community level. There's sometimes those nuances, for example, which can act as a barrier, which sometimes do not immediately emerge, for example, at the beginning. And so looking at it from a programmatic level, being able to sustain this kind of input and attention, which, of course, many times it's tied to the financing that's available. So once from a programmatic approach, that is definitely, I think, what is, if I would identify that one thing that could really have it to be actualized, I would say from that level.
Thank you.
That our experience has shown we need a champion within the government, particularly. It's really great to build the capacity, the knowledge, awareness at the community level, and even in some of the decision makers. And sometimes it's not lack of knowledge, it's that drive to go do something different, do something about it. I mentioned we made some recommendations to the government of Jamaica with regard to legislation and policy and language even that could be changed in some of those existing documents and making recommendations for new ones. And they remain recommendations. So what is going to be that different thing? Someone has to drive it. And that drive could ideally come from within the government. We're hoping that advocacy with other NGOs, other stakeholders at the table, community level will also help to drive. And we feel we need this is a little bit beyond the carrot and more of a sort of light stick approach.
Yeah, I would say the ability to be flexible and to really listen, because I think at the beginning of this project, we were thinking of certain tools that would be useful at the community level. Building an app, that was originally something, and then we listened, and we tried to determine, well, what their needs isn't what we are originally thinking, and so adapting to that is really critical in continuing that to follow that process. The voices, understanding the voices, the values, and the vision of the community there, and then having the flexibility and adaptiveness to respond to that, and to build tools that, you know, that are responding to a specific need. I think that's a really important part of the process.
All right. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, just to add, social behavior. I think when we started Resilient Islands, one of the outcomes was really understanding what people think about nature, what people think about climate change, and also measuring if we were going to get any support. We did a CAP knowledge, attitude, and practices assessment to understand, you know, the before and after the project. We are still in need of the information to see what was the aftermath, to see if we have produced any impact in the behavior of people, because that is the main ingredient to work in policy or whatever else we want to do. And the other is also the behavior, the internal behavior, right? In some ways, I feel like a preacher, TNC, the preacher, nature-based solutions. And when we started this project, even the concept, the term nature-based solutions was like talking about, I don't know, something distant. But now when you hear our colleagues from the IFRC, it's the normal language, right? It's how you do business, it's in your principles. So I am really excited to see that transformation. And I know this transformation in you, the leaders, is going also into the communities, into the volunteers. And we're talking about millions of volunteers from the Red Cross. So I really would like to see that in the future in other regions. Thanks.
Great. All right. In the interest of time, we're going to wrap up. So I'm going to ask Samantha and Kevin, because you would have been working close with the communities. How was the project received by the communities? And then I'm going to give my TNC colleagues 30 seconds to wrap up.
Yeah, so certainly, like I said, the perception of the community changed. They didn't know that the Red Cross worked in this type of scientific kind of way. So it gave us the opportunity to be there and to be there longer. So the resources helped us to be a little more deliberate in the communities. It also brought indirect strengthening to the communities in that we branched off into other areas of theory and preparedness. We prepared community disaster response teams coming out of that. We have persons trained in first response in the communities. So although it was started with the Resilient Island, bringing us back to the community where we repeated communities, it also gave us the opportunity to be there longer. Now that also puts the community with more expectations, because now you can't leave. And so forming groups and then hopefully spreading that from community to community throughout the island is going to be the bigger impact.
All right. Kevin, how was it received in Jamaica?
Yes, so it was received really well by the community, as well as the local authorities, for example, the municipal authorities, municipal corporations that works very closely with the community. And so the assessments, for example, which could be a challenge in the sense where sometimes the communities expect, you know, instant action or instant implementation. And so being able to see the patience of the community, for example, during the assessment phase, when we're doing the EVCA, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic came immediately during that time. And so, for example, the willingness of the community as well to adapt and us having virtual EVCAs, and we even had persons from Old Harbour Bay who migrated from the community, living in the US, in England, other places, joining on and being a part of the EVCA. So this kind of adapting and the patience of the community illustrated how well it has been received. And like as Samantha says, is that the expectation is that we will always be there to be undertaking this kind of work. For us, the community don't readily accept the concept of a project and that it attended.
Right.
There's an expectation that organizations will be there and continue. So of course, but that's a good part of that as well, is that it creates a platform or keeps the door open for us to continue the kind of engagement with the community to build resilience.
Great. Donna, 30 seconds.
Thanks. I'll just say that we use the opportunity of the policy outcomes and outputs that we had under this project to advance something, a United Nations Environment Program regional project called City Adapt. So we're able to utilize the learnings and, as I said, the policy outputs themselves, and more narrowly focus on city and urban and peri-urban area focus. I'll just say that we've already started to build on the work, and I hope it will continue.
Steve?
I think the story maps that were developed are very widely used and really popular, that tell the whole storyline of what happened during this project, and it marries media with maps and is really visual rich content. I think that was a good success, and the fact that governments are now considering nature in terms of the vulnerability assessments, I think is a real landmark, and it's the direction that we need to move. And so I'm really excited about that.
Eddie, you have the last word.
Yes, just from the perspective of the donors, I think they've been really receptive of the project, flexible enough to let us do some changes in the activities. Part of the scope of the project that sometimes is difficult because you have to go back and forth paperwork. But in this case, this flexibility did let us, do the changes that we see now reflected into some tangible deliverables in IKI, especially the people who's been behind this project has been excited about Resilient Islands. They would like to see more of this kind of models of these initiatives and these partnerships.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our panelists. Thank you very much, panelists. You can take your seat. As we transition into the final segment of the ceremony, we have a few closing remarks from both TNC as well as IFRC representative. The first is Steve McAndrew, and Steve is the Deputy Regional Director for the Americas for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Steve has over 25 years of international humanitarian operation experience, including service, and he looks like he's just 25, right? Right, including service with the American Red Cross, USAID, as well as the Global Emergency Group. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Steve McAndrew.
Thank you, Cleveland. Thanks all. I'm glad to know I look like I'm 25. I wish I felt that way, but that's a little bit different. So I'm supposed to give some closing remarks here. And wow, I mean, what an awesome hour we've had here. I mean, this is kind of amazing what I've just heard, watched, and listened and heard these comments. What this hour represents in terms of sweat, effort, angst, Eddie not sleeping, and like to culminate in this is really this is a great achievement, and it's a celebration we're here for today. So I'm really, really happy to be here. So I was taking down some notes here and trying to put something together here. So just some of the things I've heard today were kind of pretty amazing, I would say. So I'm happy to know, like, our panelists, the people put together the videos, everything we've done here is something I want to be part of. I'm glad to know we're working with cool scientists. I'm wishing I was a cool scientist. I mean, just listening to this, it makes me feel like I want to be part of this. And I think it's something that we need to kind of project out and repeat and promote what we have done, what we can do, and what it's like to work together. And some of the great things I've heard today, like community-led and scientifically sound. That's what I want to be. That is kind of, what a good thing to be able to kind of say, but not just put a label on, but to live it, to say we are scientifically sound and we're community-led. Those two phrases put together is something simple in terms of phrases, but to actually make it happen is monumental and monstrous. It's a giant endeavor with a lot of energy put into it that is still ongoing. So that was just a great comment today. I've also heard reefs to ridges, which I kind of thought was a very good explanation, because it just encompasses everything. So we know that the scientific input from the TNC, looking at from reefs to ridges and all the ins and outs and all the lessons learned, how they work with each other, are things that in the Red Cross, we're not always thinking that way. But if you ask who's present on the reefs to the ridges, it's us. The Red Cross is there. And just as we're sitting here today, we have Red Cross, Red Crescent volunteers working in Gaza, crossing lines in Ukraine, doing things all over the place. So we are present, and we're very happy to be part of this model and this complementary partnership we have. And I think of some of the words of kind of what Rob was saying in the beginning, and our regional director, Martha, that change is more likely with complementarity. So, and complementarity is not really easy. Right, Eddie. Eddie says right to that, because it's not easy. You have to work at it. Anything that's of value takes work. And we have different cultures, different ways of working, different priorities, different bosses, different reporting lines, budgets. Oh my gosh, how do the budgets work? So I think there's a lot to be said on this model of complementarity and how we've worked together here, because it's as we've heard, it's a model that we can share and can be used to promote others. Now, when I look at I just want to kind of read a bit my Resilient Islands cheat sheets here, right? And nature-based solutions, it's designed to support and protect the growth and protection of coral reefs and mangrove forests, to reduce the impact of waves, of storms, and how they hurt the people and damage the communities. The model we've put together shows that we can stand up to those waves. And I think this model of us working together is innovative, because we're in looking forward into the future. There's not just waves coming of storms. We have waves of ignorance, waves of tribalism, waves of disinformation, waves of negativity, waves of just every day there's another wave coming out there of how everything can't be done. But this model shows we can reinforce, we can stand up to those waves if we stand together and work together. So for me, this is a great model. I'm looking forward to standing together and moving forward. On behalf of the International Federation, we welcome this partnership with the Nature Conservancy. We're looking forward to doing more and bigger places all around the world. So from our side, you have our commitment that we are looking to move forward and build upon what we've achieved. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. And we will continue to make waves. Up next, we hear closing remarks from TNC. And to bring those remarks is my colleague, Dr. Jyoth Singh. And he joined TNC in March 2022 as institutional partnership director. and then he was promoted to Director of Policy and Strategic Programs in the division in May 2023. Before joining TNC, Jooth held several senior positions, including with the International Fund for Animal Welfare, the USAID Eastern and Southern Caribbean Division, as well as with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and with the Environmental Management Authority in Trinidad and Tobago, his homeland. And I know there are a lot of Trinis here today, so I'm sure you'll be welcome. Your son of the soil, Jooth.
Thanks so much, Cleveland. I do regard myself as a son of Caribbean soil. Although born in Trinidad, I've lived across the Caribbean, and that is my home. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. We have heard really, really amazing stories, interventions from both the International Federation of the Red Cross and colleagues from the Nature Conservancy. One of the items which was highlighted is the issue of partnerships. And just wanted to emphasize that again, that, I think in the past, organizations felt that it was more of a competition because you were looking for a space to operate. And I think that has changed so dramatically now with the experiences of projects like Resilient Islands, that you could come together and work together in cooperation rather than in competition. And so the Nature Conservancy actually is very committed to this aspect of working together with our colleagues, because we have long recognized that we cannot do it on our own, and we will only succeed if we do it in partnerships. So we're really reflecting on the experience within Resilient Islands, global organizations, the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Nature Conservancy, making that connection at the global level, working at a regional level within the Caribbean. And TNC, of course, has an office in the Caribbean, TNC Caribbean, as well as working with the International Federation of the Red Cross, which has a regional remit within the Caribbean. Then connecting at the national level, connecting at the local level, and connecting at the community level. All those various levels in terms of connection. So we are sort of spanning the horizon in terms of where work needs to be done at the global level, at the regional level, at the national level, and the local level. I think within the Caribbean context, the regional level is so important because of many issues, including issues of economies of scale, that we have set up regional entities to fill the gap in some ways because of the absence of capacity that exists at the national level. So working at the regional level is really very critical, and sometimes that is not fully understood. It is one of the case that we are making ourselves within the Nature Conservancy, that you have to work with regional organizations, that you have to work with the CARICOM secretariats, with the OECS Commission, with the 5 Cs, as we refer to the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, with the International Federation of the Red Cross that is operating within the Caribbean, so that you can have the impacts at all those levels, but reaching down to the community level, which is really very critical. From everything that I've read and everything that I've listened to and experienced myself, I think it is correct to say that this project demonstrated community leadership. To me, it's one of the showcase successes of Resilient Islands, that we have had communities involved, not only in implementing work on the ground, but in developing the approach as well. And I think that is the philosophy in terms of community engagement, is not say, okay, communities come and join us in implementation, but it's designing it out as well. And clearly within Resilient Islands, that has happened. So I wanted really for you to join me in thanking the communities operating in this project, the Old Harbor Bay in Jamaica, in Grenville in Grenada, and Michis in the Dominican Republic. Please join me in applauding those community engagements. I think we will succeed when communities take ownership, and clearly from what we've heard, that has certainly happened with resilient islands. Just wanted to say as well that we are seeing resilient islands, as has been mentioned by Eddie and others, as a first phase. We are seeing this as a project which has to be replicated, and we're seeing this as a project which has to be scaled, and we're seeing this as a project that needs to be converted to a program, as we have heard as well. That we cannot go through these short-term, 5 years is short-term, in the context of finding solutions at a global level, finding solutions to this planet. It has to be longer-term interventions. And so I think that conversion to, this phase one of resilient islands into phases that will come is very, very critical. So TNC views this as a model which has to be scaled and which has to be replicated. And scaling can take place at different levels. Of course, the issue of financing is critical. And, we within TNC, we have reflected on the small amounts of money that you get to implement a project. And in the context of what needs to be done, $5 million, $7 million, it's still small. We need to start looking at $50 million, $100 million to really have the longer term interventions. And there's an opportunity for us to do that together. TNC recently became accredited to the Green Climate Fund, and we are already putting together some projects that will be able to utilize the funding that is available through that mechanism. Eddie and myself, we are working on a concept called Operation Coastal Resilience, which will see expansion, to my mind, Eddie, on some of what I've heard with regards to the experiences here within this project. So we are thinking, bigger scale. So you have to think on all levels, right? You're thinking about communities and engaging communities at that level, but we have to be thinking in terms of a larger scale if we want to have the impact that is required. And so, accessing funding that would allow us to do that is going to be really very critical. I wanted to share as well the issue of the role of policy. I've heard that through the conversation as well. Our Chief Executive Officer, Jan Morris, has said to the team recently that we will have real successes in our ambition to reach targets within the organization, our 2030 goals within TNC, through, she said, policy. We really need to focus on policy. And, I'll share a story. Steve and myself, we were recently at the Cartagena Convention, COP17 in Aruba. And Steve, of course, is our science guru. Steve is a man for science within the organization. And he was sharing with me, was the first meeting that he attended on a policy level at a regional scale. And when we sat through three days of meetings, Steve said to me, Joe, I'm real happy I'm doing the science and you're doing the policy. Because the policy is really challenging and sometimes very boring, right? But you have to engage it. And so interventions at the policy level, I think, is really critical, and it's important to see that we address the issue of policy. So we're looking forward to the planning workshop, which is to follow this. I'm happy to see my colleague, Daniel Moshane here, who operates at a global level and who will be engaging in planning for this follow-up phase, together with colleagues from the International Federation of the Red Cross. Jennifer and I had a conversation early on as well. I think there's great work to be done. So putting the minds together for the next day and a half to develop these subsequent pieces of work, which needs to follow on from Resilient Islands, is really going to be very, very critical. I also wanted to extend thanks to the German government, the International Climate Initiative, for funding this engagement. We could not do it without their support. The German government has been very supportive of development work within the Caribbean. You've heard mention of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, which is where I worked as well, previous to joining TNC, where I set up the ecosystem-based adaptation facility. A lot of funding has been channeled by the government of Germany into the Caribbean. So we're very grateful for that. In closing, I wanted to say a huge thank you to the teams that have been operating on the Resilient Islands, the teams from within the Nature Conservancy, the teams from within the International Federation of the Red Cross, from Jamaica, from the Dominican Republic, from Grenada, who have really been the backbone of this project. And we have heard from some of them in this room how passionate they feel about engaging in this very, very critical work. So a heartfelt thanks to all those teams who have been operating to make this project, I think, a resounding success. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you so much, Mike, brother Joth. As we bring the program to a close, I just want to call on Eddie to make some brief presentation to some of our colleagues from the Red Cross. And if I may ask Samantha first to come to receive a TNC token. We'll ask Kevin. Thank you. And then we're going to ask Steve as well, McAndrew. Yes. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks very much, Eddie. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the close of the ceremony. A special thank you to everyone who participated, and also special thank you to the team who worked hard, Maria, Claudia, and the others to plan this morning's event. Really, thank you. Great job. And thank you for all of the arrangement, Yolani and everyone. We will see you in another, I think there's a break, a coffee break, and then you'll get some instructions as well from Maria and her team. Thank you very much.